Welcome to Kev's Travel Stories. Each week I'll be bringing you a story from the weird and wonderful world of travel, a world that can change the way you see life and love and even the way we find meaning. Places that are iconic and sometimes surprising and even terrifying. So sit back and enjoy while we go on a magical mystery tour together. Welcome to Kevin's Travel Stories, and I'm going to share a story of a recent visit to Japan and the capital Tokyo. We went along on our very first morning with a guide. I would always, as I say this often to you, recommend that when you visit some of these big cities, shell out a few shekels for a guide. A local guide probably costs in the region of between $3 to $10 an hour. That's a couple of espressos or a couple of Americanos. And you may say, well, yes, but why bother? There's so much on the internet and there is so many guidebooks. There's so much content on YouTube, but nothing compares to being hand in hand with a local who knows the place, who knows how to introduce you to the culture of the place, who knows how to really let you understand and can show you firsthand the nooks and crannies, secret alleyways. So always, I would suggest as a travel writer to find a local guide. It won't cost you the earth, and you will discover the earth, the real true earth of the place you are visiting. And so we had our travel guide, and it was the first morning in Tokyo, and it had been cold the night before. We are within winter, it's January. And I'd have to say it was a bit grim being wrapped up against the really freezing conditions. But the next morning broke warm. The sky was an absolute steel blue. There was not one cloud as we ventured out into Tokyo's capital. And of course, we took the underground. It's been compared to when you look at the circulation maps of the human body. Intricate, all with a purpose, but almost indecipherable. And this is where I had one of my acquainted rows with Diamond, because he'd spent the night studying the underground routes and he knew more than the guide as to exactly how and why and where. And that led to a few little fractions, and it led to us disappearing to the other side of Tokyo. That's a story for another time. On this occasion, we followed the guide and she took us up into the heart of the city. Yes, we were going to go to see the Emperor's Palace, the famous emperor who was once regarded as a deity by the society in Japan. No longer since the First World War. He's been downgraded to just a mere human, but there is still this aura of strangeness and otherness. And visiting the Imperial Palace is really quite extraordinary. You get this vast scale, because the Imperial Palace is surrounded by this fantastic moat, a huge moat. It's almost like going back to Angkor Wat in Siem Reap in Cambodia. This vast scale of a palace that has defences and fortresses. Of course, the Imperial Palace was often in its long history besieged by those that wanted to take over ultimate power. So anyway, we went to visit the Imperial Palace and we looked at the moats, we looked at the fortifications, and we stood there basking in the sun, taking off the various layers because suddenly the temperature had gone from 0 to the high teens. I think it ended up about 18 degrees. So we were expecting coldness and we were then sweating. And our guide explained this extraordinary history of the emperors, how Emperor Hirohito at the end of the Second World War had actually come from the palace and addressed the people and ended this terrible conflict, which had ended up in a nuclear conflagration in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and had to fight his military commanders to make sure that peace visited. And isn't it extraordinary when you visit the capital, Tokyo, that was once razed to the ground, not through nuclear weapons, but through a firestorm that was hardly seen in the history of modern warfare. The city was mainly built of wood and it was razed to the ground. So as you stand outside the Imperial Palace, you look around and you see a Manhattan landscape, skyscape, incredible buildings of glass and steel soaring above you, glinting in the morning sunshine. And it's a modern world, a rich world, a vibrant, pulsating world. But then you go through the doors of the Imperial Palace, past the guards that all have their white gloves on, and they nod to you and they search you with very great dignity. And you go under these huge portals and into the palace itself. And if you turn left when you get in, you can go up a route that takes you to the gardens at the back. And we did this. We trudged up a big hill and everything's on this grand imperial scale. It really sort of takes your breath away as you plod up. You can get a glimpse of the actual headquarters and the private residence where the emperor still resides. You're not allowed in there apart from on very special occasions. But you can still just breathe in the history, breathe in the etiquette, this very somber, dignified role. The emperor still has a very powerful place in Japanese society that is not to be taken lightly. And you should certainly, when you're in Japan, not pass aspersions on the emperor or his title, because that would be regarded as beyond the pale. And as we've said in a previous podcast, Tokyo society and Japanese society in general are very strict, very hierarchical, and you are not supposed to smoke or throw litter or be boisterous or antisocial. So that is a big change if you're coming from Europe, which is quite a boisterous society. And up the hill we went. Unfortunately, the guide told us, it's a little too early in the season. But if you'd come 6 weeks later, you would have seen the most spectacular symbol of Japanese life. That is the blossom. And that really made my heart sink, because one of the great things about coming to Japan is to see the blossom in spring, which is an iconic symbol. It only lasts for a week or two. But it was a pity to have schlepped all this way across and not a blossom in sight, apparently. Anyway, after we turned the corner, I spotted something in the distance, and I got a sudden little shiver up the back of my neck. I said, "That's pink, isn't it? A pink shimmer on the horizon." And my guide looked and smiled. And so we trudged on, and we came to the circle of the blossom trees. And though the majority were devoid of any flowers, there was one that stood just opposite where you can actually go to the public loos. You'll see it if you ever visit. There's only one public loo, and very clean and spotless it is. But there was one full, magnificent tree, resplendent in its blossom. And I have to say, I got one of those moments that only travel can give you, when my whole spine tingled. And I said, "It's there. How can this be?" And she said, "You're very lucky. It's never usually out." And so we went up, and I tentatively just reached out my fingers to touch the cherry blossom of Tokyo and the Imperial Gardens cherry blossom, which is the place where everybody comes for those few special days to celebrate being in Japan, being in Tokyo, taking part in this cultural recognition of something special. And that's what I experienced that day, the wonderful something special of traveling to a far distant land and encountering its symbol, this special symbol. And this is a particularly extraordinary symbol, because it's not like Mount Fuji that's always there. This is something that only comes and visits once a year. So I stood, had my photo taken, and just breathed in the sheer delight of and surprise of seeing the imperial blossom, as the sun beat down and the sky shouted springtime. And it's one of those memories that even now, when I look back, gives me a little tremor of excitement and nostalgia. that I visited Japan and I went to the Imperial Gardens and I saw the one blossom tree that was there to greet us, to show us that the journey had not been in vain. And isn't that really what travel is all about? Seeing something that you will remember for the rest of your days, the beautiful, vibrant cherry blossom in Emperor's Garden.